Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today around improving telehealth and patient care with high-performing virtual workspaces empowered by Citrix or VMware Horizon. By ways of introduction, you have myself, Stacey Leidwinger. I'm part of the marketing team here at Goliath. I also have with me Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant. Just a few housekeeping items as we go to get started. The agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges on why it's so hard to deliver that high-performing user experience, especially when your users are remote and trying to deliver strong telehealth to their patients. We're then going to start to identify what are some key challenges that many of them experience, from slow logon, slow session performance, and how can you go ahead and isolate root cause of those issues so you can resolve quickly. And we're also going to tell you how you can prevent them from even occurring. Throughout the session, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. We'll get to them as we see them come in, and if we don't, we'll address them at the end. And finally, one question we always get is, will this recording be available later? Yes. Within the next 24 hours, you'll have a copy of this recording in your inbox that you can go back to review or even share with your colleagues if it makes sense for you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. One of the things that I often like to ground everyone on during these sessions is just talk a little bit high level. What are some of the challenges that many of you in health IT face? What we hear from our clients is that within health IT departments, you often have 50% of the budget, 50% of the headcount as your enterprise IT counterparts to support very similar infrastructures. And that's even become more challenging as more of your medical staff, back office staff, clinicians start working remotely and from home, and you're trying to manage both users that are in the health systems at the hospitals as well as at home working. The other big thing is there's such high sensitivity when it comes to delivering an optimal end user experience, because truly not having access to your EHR applications or things being slow can have a negative impact on patient care. And finally, it requires anywhere from 15 to 20 different vendors to really come together and deliver that end user experience on that virtual workspace, providing your clinicians and medical staff access to the applications and the EHR systems they need in order to deliver that patient care. And this is really where Goliath comes in, and we're going to talk a little more about this in a few minutes. But we offer embedded intelligence and automation that really, what our customers tell us, is like operationally adding 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts that is proactively looking for issues, resolving some of them automatically, and if not resolving automatically, isolating and telling you exactly how you can resolve them so that you can deliver optimal patient care. In doing this, we can provide proactive alerts and let you know anytime any threshold of poor user experience, from slow logons to slow performance, is occurring, and alert you so you can address them before your clinicians are impacted. And one of the things that really sets us apart is we are the only solution that offers troubleshooting and monitoring of that end user experience across your Citrix and VMware Horizon environment, as well as within your EHR systems. We have specific modules for Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a few minutes. So stepping back again and augmenting a lot of those challenges, a lot of the challenges that come in really supporting your remote workers for telehealth comes in the lack of data. So when your clinicians or your health team has issues, whether it be slow logon, slow session performance, maybe sessions are disconnected, maybe they can't get access to the EHR application they need, there's a lot of finger pointing that happens. Is it the EHR system itself that's causing the problem? Is it the delivery infrastructure? Is it the internet connection? Is it a bandwidth issue? Is it an endpoint issue with the machine? Or is it even user behavior? When you don't have data to isolate that root cause, you can have even up to 5 or 6 health IT members all trying to identify what that problem is, saying it's the application, it's the infrastructure, and you waste a significant amount of time just trying to isolate the root cause, not even actually being able to fix it. The other piece of this missing data is often you are completely reliant on the subjective nature of your end users. And they will often call in days later saying, hey, you know, my system was slow 2 days ago. Well, what do you mean by slow? How slow? What were you doing? I don't remember. I just remember that it negatively impacted my patient and I'm upset about it. And so when you can't get that whole picture from your end user, it also makes it really challenging. And the final piece of this is often your users won't even call you. So you don't even know there's an issue until there's some kind of team meeting or an executive roundtable, and all of a sudden everyone's complaining about what a bad experience they're having, especially remotely. Now, these challenges exist, and there's good reasons for these challenges. It's not that anyone is not doing their job. It's not that the technology isn't working, but there is severe complexity in how you deliver that individual workspace and how you deliver access to your EHR application that many, even in IT, don't understand. There's also a shortage of experts that can really support these systems, and I'm sure many of you on the call face this, where you simply don't have enough staff to support the needs that you have, and the staff you have might not be experts in the systems that are causing the issues. And if you don't have purpose-built software that has that embedded intelligence and automation that can bring visibility to root cause, you can really struggle. So let's drill down a little bit more into challenge one. Many of you might understand this, but we've had a lot of our clients over the years use this slide to articulate the challenge to management. So you have overall your end users, and every one of your end users is unique. They have a unique endpoint. They use the systems differently. They access different applications. Now, especially as many are delivering via telehealth, they have different internet connections. Some have better home Wi-Fi connections. Some might be connecting on a hotspot. Even within your hospital, you probably have different floors that are better connectivity than others. So already you have significant variables when you think about the end user, the endpoint, the connection, even their behavior. What are they doing on the machine? Are they running a large audio file in the background? Do they have a large print job that's just sticking and stuck, running and taking up space and memory? Then you've got the data center. And inside that data center, you have a whole nother layer of complexity. Let's say you're surfacing your EHR application through Citrix. You've got NetScaler, Storefront, Broker, desktop and applications. If you have Horizon, you have a similar infrastructure. From there, then you're delivering your EHR application. If you're using a hosted EHR application, that itself might even be in a different environment that you're linking and bringing information back to. You've got your backend systems from your licensing server to your profile servers. You have your hypervisor host layers. In addition, you might have not only your EHR applications being hosted or in the cloud, but any or many of these parts might be on premise. Some might be in the cloud, private, public. So when you think about all the technologies and the end user that all needs to come together in order to deliver seamless access and have a great end user experience, there's a lot of areas that could go wrong. And so when someone does call in and says, I'm having login troubles, I can't treat my patients via telehealth, it's really hard to know, oh, the problem actually has nothing to do with Citrix. It has nothing to do with Epic. It's actually an issue in Active Directory, and you have a bad map driver connected in your GPOs. You need a solution that can drive visibility so you can isolate that root cause really quickly and resolve it. The other challenge that I mentioned is just simply lack of staff. And so when you don't have enough staff, it becomes even more challenging. On average, and we actually worked with Citrix, for example, to come up with these numbers, there's 400,000 Citrix customers out there in the world. You need roughly about 2 to 3 experts in order to support each of those customers. So the demand's about 1.2 million. There is not enough experts to fulfill that demand. When we walk through all the different certification layers, there's only about 50,000 experts. So if you're one of them on the phone, it's great. You're a scarce resource, but I bet there's not enough of you, and having a technology to augment your capabilities would significantly go a long way in helping deliver better patient care and help support your users. And then finally, it really is a lack of technology. So this really builds onto it. George Spears is a Citrix technology professional. He's actually also certified in Epic. He supports a number of different hospitals and health systems. And what he says is he can spend up to 30% of his time troubleshooting basic end user issues. And this was before the pandemic. I spoke with him not too long ago, and he said this time's even gone up further, especially as the amount of telehealth visits are happening and more people are working remote, whether it be the clinician or back office staff. So when you look at all of these challenges, it's not surprising that sometimes it is hard to deliver a great user experience. So in order to ensure that you're constantly delivering that experience and that you can help solve these problems, we at Goliath have built a purpose-built tool that with its embedded intelligence and automation will automatically monitor all events, conditions, and failure points that could negatively impact the end user experience. So if you take what those conditions are, typically they come in 3 different ways: logon initiation, logon duration, or session performance. So here, we just give you a sampling of those that we are proactively identifying what to alert, what to monitor, the thresholds to set, and then we alert you anytime those thresholds are exceeded. That way you can proactively address issues before your end users are impacted. And when our customers leverage us, they say when they do this, they've truly transformed their health IT system from being reactive to proactive. And here, before we dive into some of the examples and how we do it, I did want to go ahead and showcase, I know many of you come from health systems, we had a few others join as well that were not, but here's just a sampling of our client base. And what you'll see is we can scale to some of the largest health institutes, but we also can help because we have the price point and the ease of use profile that allows us to help smaller health systems as well as SMBs out there in the market. But one of the things that every single one of these clients will tell you is that when they use Goliath, it is as if they've augmented their team with 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts, because we are proactively anticipating issues and resolving them before end users are impacted. We're resolving issues quickly and isolating root cause when problems do occur. And we're documenting everything we do from end to end. And that aspect of being able to document and collect data, being able to share the data, being able to integrate it into third-party systems like a ticketing or a event management system like Splunk, and then also enhancing it with out-of-the-box reports or leveraging a system like Power BI to show the data is absolutely critical, and we'll give you a couple examples around that as well. And then, as I said, in healthcare, we have those purpose-built modules that we're going to discuss, which will not only pull in data from your IT delivery infrastructure, end user behavior, but also the EHR system itself. So you can truly identify when someone says, I can't log into Cerner or Meditech slow today, is it the application or is it something in the delivery infrastructure? And I think that's something we're hearing more and more from our health clients is they need help to really break apart the end user experience, because all too often it's the EHR application that's getting all the blame when there's performance issues. But the reality is, and we even had one customer tell us 9 out of 10 times it has nothing to do with the EHR application. But that's how our clinicians, that's how our end users see the problem manifest itself. So with that, let's go ahead and start breaking into scenarios. So the things that we wanted to talk about today is, I'm sure these are things that you often hear, especially in supporting the virtual workspace, whether it's telehealth or within patient care at the hospital in person. And it's, how can you reduce your logon time? We talk to a lot of hospitals. Many of them have SLAs around, for example, how can I ensure that my logon times are less than 30 seconds, my reconnects are less than 10 seconds, and by the way, I need to keep that steady even if my employees are working from home and I have less control. We're then going to talk about how you can go ahead and prevent clinical applications being down or slow. How can you proactively be alerted when there's an issue so you can address them before end users even start their day? And then we're going to talk about measuring the experience and how can you really determine, especially when people are working remotely, do they have the right experience in order to deliver a high quality patient care, or is the technology preventing them from delivering good patient care? So let's dive into number 1. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to give a little bit of a use case and talk about how one of our customers are using our solution and the challenges they're overcoming. And then Yemi's going to actually give a demonstration and show you how they were doing that. So this is a very typical story. This is a health system in the Midwest, and they came to us because their end users were complaining that they had login times over 2 minutes, and they happened to be using Epic. And so everyone was saying, Epic is slow, Epic is slow. We cannot have this slowness in Epic. Those that owned Epic were getting really frustrated because they didn't see any issue on their side, and they were saying, it's not my problem, right? So there was a lot of that finger pointing, even among the IT team, with other vendors, to really identify how can we deliver a great user experience and improve overall patient care. Well, at the end of the day, they used data and they started to drill in, and they realized, again, most of the time the issue was not with Epic. In fact, they found the issue was not with Citrix, which is who they were using. it was actually issues within the underlying infrastructure, or there wasn't enough bandwidth allocation. So one example is they had a lot of issues in their group policy. There were a lot of poor printers mapped that were hanging. There were drivers mapped incorrectly in the GPOs. Really, GPOs hadn't been cleaned up for a really long time, and that was what was making the logon time so long. Yemi, do you want to take us through an example on how they were able to identify that root cause and deliver permanent fixed solutions?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's probably best if we jump right into the technology and jump to the portion of the technology that customers would go to when they are starting to hear from customers or from end users that their Epic is slow, or my session has an issue. Let's start at that portion, and that's what I'm actually showing here on the screen. This is the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. This is where all of those sessions will populate in the environment, and this is typically the first stop, the first troubleshooting stop, because this is going to align all of the information and all of those components that are impacting that user session, align it to the time frame of the session, so you can quickly correlate and figure out exactly what's causing issues. So, in this case, you can quickly and easily go back and pull historic sessions. So, for instance, if I wanted to see sessions for the last 2 months, as I'm showing here, I have the ability to do so. I can search for an individual user, application, delivery group, so on and so forth. I can even search for things like receiver version or anything that's in text here on the screen, leveraging this quick filter. But it's really quick. It's really easy to be able to identify the session that you're looking for, then click down on that session. And now, as I mentioned before, I now have everything that impacted this user session showing up here on my screen in these sort of 7 tabs that we have at the top of the screen. We have a dedicated tab for the logon process, which we'll spend time in for this particular use case. But there's also tabs on the user experience from an ICA perspective, the VDAs and the servers or components that actually impacted the session, down to things on the perfmon level, applications and processes, and even alerts and event logs. So that by the time you've traversed through these tabs, then you have a quick, you can emerge with an answer or a conclusion as to why this user session was negatively impacted. With this particular customer, this example, they were having issues with logon times. So in those cases, they can click directly on that logon tab here. And here we break down everything that went into this particular user's logon process. And you can see that this page is broken into 2 sections here. If you separate that sort of vertically, you have the top section, which is going to break down everything happening from a brokering perspective. So at the delivery controller, as well as what's happening at the client or Citrix receiver, Workspace app. And we do this without deploying any technology to the endpoint machines. We're able to see things like how long ICA file download took, or how long it took to establish a micro VPN connection. Any startup processes that are taking place locally on that machine that could be negatively impacting or increasing the logon time. But of course, we can also see what's happening from a delivery controller perspective. So from drive mapping, logon scripts, printer mapping, and overall session startup time from a brokering perspective. Now, the bottom section, this is going to break down the process, but then give you additional insight into some problem areas, typically in the logon process. So here we can expand the authentication section, where we can see the user, what OUs this user is a part of, what domain controller was in charge of authenticating the session. This is where customers will be able to find things like, well, this domain controller is the wrong domain controller. This is, a domain controller from a different site. That's adding times to how long those LDAP calls are going to take to execute. But also, if we look here at the bottom of the screen, it's a group policy section where we show you each individual policy that affected this user session, down to the policy name and how long each one is taking. Now, this is our lab environment, so there's really not much going on here, but I'm going to flip back over and show you screenshots from this particular customer. because I think it's important. In their case, as Stacy mentioned, they were actually having a lot of issues with group policies. And with the technology, as you can see here, they were able to, first of all, confirm that the logons are taking really long, drill into it in the brokering section to figure out, okay, most of that's happening from a profile load perspective. And upon drilling into the group policy section, they saw all of their policies and a specific drive map policy that was sort of mapping drives or mapping sessions to a drive that was decommissioned. That was sort of then causing a timeout period. They were able to identify that quickly, remove that policy, and really cut their logon times down by almost 90%. So you can see having that full visibility, and there's not really any tool that's going to give you this amount of data into that logon process. Having this visibility allowed them to quickly isolate the root cause of those issues, solve them, and then over time being able to prove that these fix actions actually cut down their logon times by 90%. I wanted to point out before we go into the next scenario, I just wanted to point out that we do have this same level of detail for VMware Horizon as well, being able to drill into the logon process, as well as all of those other components that impact the Horizon session, drill into the logon process and find exactly what group policies or exactly what issues from an authentication perspective are negatively impacting the user sessions. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Stacy so we could talk about the next story.
Thank you, Yemi. The next story, we've actually done a webinar with Universal Health Services. And so here, we're going to kind of replay what's been said, but you can read it on our website as well. They originally came to us because they were looking to actually prevent application outages and actually flow time as well. So one of the challenges they had was, before using Goliath, they had a number of different hospitals across the US, I think 50 or more. And they would have many of their IT team go in early in the day, 5 a.m., log in, kick up a Citrix session, log into Cerner, make sure that they could get the different nursing applications, the billing applications, all of that up and running to make sure that it was working properly. But the challenge was, not only was that time intensive, but they often didn't catch everything, and it was also very manual. And so one of the times that they were doing this, they were getting constant complaints that Dragon Dictation was crashing. And this is a voice-to-text technology that probably many of you use. And again, there was a lot of that similar finger pointing across teams and vendors. Why is it crashing? What's going on? And so all of this came to accumulation, and they actually used Goliath in two ways, and Yemi's going to walk through this. The first was to prevent that manual effort to identify if there was outages or slowness throughout their Citrix application and as people would be using Cerner. And so they proactively deployed application availability monitoring that would go ahead and continually test if the application was available across all of their locations, and also identify anytime there was slowness involved so that IT could be alerted and they could address the issue before users were drastically impacted. The other thing they did was use some of the technology that you saw Yemi just show through in order to isolate root cause. So he kind of walked through more of the slow logon. One of the things that they were experiencing was really slow session performance, and it didn't look like it had anything to do with the infrastructure. And they're really challenged with, how do we isolate this root cause? And it was impacting not only those that were on premises at the hospital, but also sometimes when people were working remotely, and they really needed to identify the issue. And they were able to go ahead and use our metrics and discover that the reason there was slow session performance was actually because their riverbed device was causing the issues. It had nothing to do with Cerner, nothing to do with Citrix. It was another piece of that 15 different systems that come up to make that user experience. So Yemi, do you want to show first how the application availability monitoring works?
Absolutely. So before we go into the technology, I thought it's important to sort of set the stage a little bit and talk about how this is deployed for Universal Health Services. So if we look on the screen here, we have, so if you, UHS leverages Cerner, which is a completely hosted application that is delivered via Citrix. So if you look on at the top left-hand side of the screen, Our technology is actually the only technology that's allowed or that is deployed in Cerner RHL in their hosted environment. And the reason that's there is because we actually from there are able to integrate with Citrix to give full end-to-end visibility when it comes to the user's experience. So there's technology there that's going to sort of drive the user experience and session monitoring capability of the technology. There's also a central console that is inside of UHS's data center, and this is where they're able to manage, understand the data, pull up the technology, etc. And then finally, they have these remote application launchers that are deployed at, I think, about 36 different acute care hospital locations. And from these locations, the technology is, there's a lightweight piece of technology that's typically on a laptop or a workstation or something like that. And from those locations, they are logging on and launching the Cerner delivered or the Citrix delivered applications. In this case, it would be Cerner, logging on and launching them 24/7. I think there are about 15,000 launches per day in the environment to make sure that these are up and running. And if they're not, IT gets a real-time alert and they can get ahead of that and either escalate quickly to the other teams or even solve them and limit the end user impact altogether. So to give you some perspective as to what is actually taking place, from those different acute care hospital locations, I have a quick video here showing the technology actually launching a Cerner session. So from that location, from that laptop or VM, the technology is able to open up a web browser to a NetScale or a storefront page. It's able to sign in the same way an end user would. It can accept security statements and things like that. It can also then confirm that the storefront page loads. It can navigate the storefront page if needed, depending on the configuration. And then it's going to start logging on and launching these applications and waiting and making sure that there is a successful presentation. So you saw FirstNet, now it says power chart. And once it's able to confirm that the application is able to be launched, then of course, then it closes out the applications and continues on its way. Now, if there's an issue with any step of that process, IT now gets a real-time alert, and then they're able to jump over to the technology to take a closer look at each one of those launches. So here's the page that they would go to. This is the application availability analysis tab. And this is your central management and configuration console for these launches that are taking place from your different locations. And you can see here, this page is broken down into two sections. You have the top section, which is a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the environment. And then you also have the bottom section, which is going to give you details into each one of those launches. So if we look at the top of the screen here, you can actually filter based on date range and sort of sort and pull back the sessions or pull back the launches historically. You can filter based on the locations, or in this case, it would be the acute care hospital locations that UHS is launching applications from. And you can also filter by applications or desktops that you're using this technology to launch. Now, if there's an issue, you can analyze each individual launch here at the bottom of the screen, and you can see that this is going to show the date and times of the launches. It's going to show what applications or desktops were being launched, where they were being launched from, and ultimately whether those launches were successful or if they failed. And if they did fail, you can actually click down on this magnifying glass icon, in which you now get a screenshot of each step of the process. So basically, everything we saw in that video is then represented here with screenshots. So now not only are you getting this sort of ability to preemptively test and make sure the environment is up and running, you're also getting screenshots and details into those potential issues that could impact the users, so you don't have to replicate that, or as Stacy mentioned, talk to apathetic end users, that unreliable end users that might have exited out of an error message or something like that. So you're getting that early warning system, and you're also getting these sort of details so that you can get ahead of these issues and solve them. Actually, Universal Health Services had a a potential issue that they caught with this technology after a maintenance window. As the applications team was, making some adjustments to the application, and what happened was they when they tested the application afterwards, they tested it using admin credentials. So it presented for the admins, but it was not going to present for end users. But because this technology was able to run its normal course, it was able to find these issues at about 4 o'clock in the morning, send out a real-time alert. So IT was able to confirm that those issues were taking place with the screenshot evidence and solve them, and limited, I think they were able to prevent about 10,000 users from starting their workday with these issues if these were not taken care of. So that's the first portion, right? Being able to get ahead of issues that could impact the availability of the applications in the environment. As Stacy mentioned, they were also leveraging our technology to understand the clinician experience. So when a clinician calls in complaining about slowness or complaining about an issue inside of their session, they're able to drill into that to figure out exactly what was causing that that problem. To get to that, I actually have I'm going to pull up to that portion that we talked about, at a high level in the first scenario, which is the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. And again, this is where you would go when a user has an issue or is complaining about slowness or something like that. And again, you can quickly isolate the user session, go back historically to take a look at different sessions that are available. In this case, I'm just going to click on this user here. And now, again, as I click on the session, I now get a pop-up of about 7 or 8 tabs. It's going to break down everything that went into this user's experience. And of course, we talked about the Logon tab, but here you can see an ICHCX tab and an app server tab, hypervisor host, down to, again, event logs and processes. But where I want to start is this summary tab, because this summary tab is going to pull in high-level detail on each one of those tabs so that IT can pretty much start to make sense or understand or come up with quick answers as to why this user might be having some slowness or issues inside of their session. So if I'm looking at this session here, of course, I can see at the top of the screen all of those components that that was involved in this user session. I can see details into the logon process. And I can also see here key performance metrics. So when users are calling in saying Cerner is slow in this case, or for instance, Epic is slow, you can understand from a Citrix delivery infrastructure perspective, is this user actually having a poor experience? So if I look here on the session, this session is having about 200 milliseconds of latency. You can see it spikes up at one point in their session. So this is probably not the greatest session that we can find. We can understand now if this is a network problem or a resource problem by looking at network latency. And this is real-time network latency, not a ping-based network latency or an ICMP-based network latency. This isn't sending a test package. This is actually a metric that we're getting through deep integration into Citrix and the ICA protocol. So the ICA protocol is automatically measuring all of this. And through our integration, we're able to present it here on the screen. So we can tell that for the most part, most of that round trip time comprises of network latency. So we can essentially roll out VM resources or host resources or anything happening inside of the data center from an infrastructure perspective as being the cause of the slowness for this user session. So we know it's a network problem. Where do we go from there? That's when we can look at this bottom metric here. This is connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver or the Workspace app at this user's location. So wherever this user is located, it looks like a home user, you can see how much bandwidth that they have at their house for Citrix, which tells you definitively if they have enough bandwidth. So in this session, you can see that it's probably not the greatest connection, and that is probably why they're having some slowness. And you can, essentially correlate drops in connection speed at a particular user's location to spikes in network latency and round trip time inside of a session. UHS was able to, they were having issues with a particular region, I think it was their Nevada region, and they were able to leverage this technology to look at all of those sessions that were being affected, and it turns out that they were actually seeing poor connectivity from those different hospital locations that were in the Nevada region. They then went back historically and pulled up those same users and their sessions from those same locations, and they saw good connectivity. So they tracked back with those historical sessions to a point where the connectivity dropped. They went over to the network team with that sort of information, and it turns out that they just put in a new device at that moment that wasn't configured correctly. It was a riverbed device that just was in half duplex, and they were able to, once they removed that, they saw automatically the connection speed went back up. So this is heavily leveraged to give you that understanding of user experience and why they're having a poor experience in a couple of clicks. And of course, that was all done on the summary tab without even having to drill into some of the other tabs. For instance, the app server tab, where you can see the performance of the server for the time frame of that session. And keep in mind that this is a Cerner remote hosted session as well. Of course, we can tie that all back down to the processes that are running inside of that machine, the alerts and logs that we're getting from that machine as well. So in any issue that could impact this user, would automatically be able to see that in one single view. Now, there is a lot of information here, specifically in the ICHDX channel, where we break down the different channels and the different bandwidth types that are being leveraged inside of a user session. So a lot of this is kind of new. And what we've done in our technology is we've embedded this sort of knowledge base that allows you to understand any page that you're on just by clicking on that little question mark icon at the top right-hand side of the screen. And it takes you directly to our support center that breaks down each one of these sections. It breaks down the metrics. It breaks down also how to use these metrics to troubleshoot issues in your environment. Of course, we also have trainings and things like that. But at any point in time, you can click on that question mark icon and get details and enable you to sort of understand exactly what's impacting or exactly how you can leverage these metrics to come up with answers. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Stacy so we can talk about the next story.
Thank you, Yemi. And so what you've seen is we've given you examples on how you can anticipate issues, how you can troubleshoot and isolate root cause. The next thing that we hear from our customers is it all comes down to the data. And how can you really measure that clinician experience? How do you know what is going on as they do their day-to-day job and who's experiencing poor performance? Are you meeting your SLAs? And this is exactly what this healthcare system came to us. They happen to be a children's hospital, and they were really focused on how can we make sure that our initial logons are below 30 seconds and our reconnects are below 10 seconds. And not only are we investing to fix this solution, and by the way, again, it must work both remotely and when people are within our hospitals today, but how do we make sure that we measure that long term? Because we don't want to have this slowly degrading performance, which seems to be the problem every time we go out to do something. And so they were able to go ahead and not only fix solutions around logon times, like Yemi showed, but they were able to go ahead and build reports for management that showed that they were meeting their SLAs, that they weren't having a chronic problem any longer when it came into logon time and session performance. And then Yemi's actually going to show you some additional reports that we have that we've provided different organizations based on their needs to really measure not only the performance for the end user perspective, but also measure productivity from end users, as well as the performance of the systems below the infrastructure layer, at the infrastructure layer, to show that performance. And something to keep in mind when Yemi shows a lot of these reports is really data. And we allow you to work with the raw data. In fact, we have a lot of health systems that are taking that data and they are exporting it through CSV or Excel and sharing with management, or they're putting it in the third party, integrating it with third party systems like a ServiceNow or a Splunk or a Power BI And then many use our native-to-the-box reports to really enhance the data, leveraging those reporting functionality we have. And we can go ahead and get information based on a week, month, even a full year, so that you can really trend information over time as well. Yemi, do you want to kind of give an example of what some of those reports look like and where we report on?
Absolutely. Yeah, if we take that first example, Stacy, where they wanted to understand all of their sessions, the log-on times in their sessions in the environment. This is that sort of is the log-on duration report that gave them that information. So you can see all of the sessions here, whether it's a reconnected session or whether it isn't. It's a standard sort of log-on. You can see also it's going to leverage some of the details that we have in our technology when it comes to the log-on process. So you can see each of the stages of the log-on process, for each individual user. This is very helpful, particularly with IT, from an IT perspective, because this allows IT to determine what portions they need to sort of focus their attention on to cut down their log-on times, whether it's improving GPOs or improving profile management, log-on scripts, authentication, so on and so forth. This really gives you that ability to go ahead and do so. There are other reports that Stacey mentioned that are sort of that leverage our deep metrics, but then sort of track and trend these things over time. As we talked about earlier, we have templates for different reporting tools like Power BI and Tableau that allow you to sort of create these sort of reports and dashboards and understand exactly how log-on times are, per date, but still giving you that same granularity into the different stages of the log-on process, so you can track and trend those as well. Here's one that a customer actually created in their environment, which is going to track log-on times, again, giving you that detail into each stage of the process, but here they're actually tracking and trending that per application. They're also trending that per date, and showing the session count as well. This is sort of all very customizable, so that you can really create these dashboards and views that allow you to really create or to understand your data, and then drive any definitive fix action so that you can improve the environment or show improvement to the environment as a whole. And then finally, we have our end user productivity report. And this report is something that has been very heavily used, especially now when a lot of users are working remotely. This is a report that's going to break down the users, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, what infrastructure they're connecting into the environment via, and then ultimately their duration of their session, as you see here, how long they were actually spending interacting in their session, and then conversely, of course, the inactivity, or what people refer to as the idle time, their interaction percentage, and max inactivity time, which is the maximum amount of concurrent time that this user was inactive in their session. This is sort of heavily used now to understand how users are working now in a sort of remote workspace environment. Are users logging in earlier on in the day and then taking a break to sort of be with their kids or homeschooling and things like that, and then logging back in later on to finish up with work? Are users actually working? These sort of questions are answered leveraging this report because of our deep integration with Citrix, and our ability to tell how much this user or how much actual traffic is being used in their session, and the different types of traffic that constitute a user actually working inside of their session. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Stacy and to wrap us up and head into questions.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. And we had a few questions come in. If you have some, please go ahead and submit in the Q&A box. One of the questions we often get is, how long does this take to get up and running? It sounds great, but do I have enough time to even put it in and start utilizing? We have a white glove service, and we have proven that we can get clients up and running in less than 2 hours. So we'll get you fully installed. We will work with our technical consultants to get you set up with those out-of-the-box reports as well as alerts. And then keep in mind, the big differentiation really is that embedded intelligence and automation. So we are going to automatically discover your entire Citrix or Horizon environment, identify what we want to alert on, right? What are the thresholds? What do we need to monitor? And set those thresholds that really meet your organizational needs. And then as Yemi showed, we also have really embedded knowledge that will allow you to identify how to use the metrics and data in a troubleshooting scenario so that you can be effective when it comes to isolating root cause. So with that, Yemi, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one is from Jennifer. For your application availability monitor, how is it deployed at each location?
Yeah, so it's as I mentioned, it's deployed on a laptop or a workstation at the different locations. So you've seen customers either get a laptop that they are deprecating or something like that and send it over to a particular location. If there is sort of virtual infrastructure that can be spun up at that location, it can be done like that. It can also be leveraged or put in the cloud, for instance, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. So you can set it up there. We actually have one of our larger airline companies, customers, launching applications from different regions in AWS because all of their users are remote. So it's typically very easy to install, very easy to set up, and it's typically deployed on a sort of Windows machine at a particular location that you want to test availability from.
Thank you, Yemi. Next question comes from Russell. What type of alerts can be set up?
That's a good question. So our technology actually comes with embedded intelligence, and it's automatically looking for conditions, failure points, and thresholds that can actually cause end user experience issues. And these sort of conditions, thresholds, and events, of course, can be customized, looking into anything from Windows perfmon to the Citrix environments, user experience, so on and so forth. I actually have a view that I wanted to show that might add some additional context there. Because of all of these embedded intelligence, because of all of the embedded intelligence, and over 300 alerts that we deploy into your environment, we also leverage those monitoring rules and alerts to drive a heat map structure and a lot of views. One of which is our automatic discovery and dependency map view. This view will automatically discover your environment, map them out, and then all those components, of course, and then add those monitoring rules to this. So you would be looking at your storefront servers, your NetScalers or ADCs, delivery controllers, and any supporting servers in the environment. So domain controllers, licensing servers, PBS servers, so on and so forth. And these will then look for issues with resource utilization, any context-specific health checks based on the role of the server in your delivery infrastructure. And if any alerts have triggered on this machine, you'd be able to see that here in the bottom of the screen. We can also, of course, drill into the delivery layer here, where you can see a logical view of the environment. There are issues taking place from a user experience perspective. These components will start to turn red. You can click on a particular component where you can then drill into those components specifically, as well as the user experience on those components that are sort of tied to those components. So you not only get the embedded intelligence and the alerting that is very focused on Citrix, VMware, and user experience, but you also have it all in a sort of live updating knock view that allows you to identify those bottlenecks and how these components are directly impacting user experience. Hopefully that's able to answer the questions there.
Great, thanks, Yemi. Next question comes from Razi. How different are you from Citrix Director?
That's a good question. And I know we get that question a lot. So I actually have a slide here that, let me pull that up. A slide here that breaks down, it enables us to talk a little bit about the differences between our technology and any other sort of utilities or tools that come with your existing sort of base technology. So if you look here on this chart, on this slide, if you look in the middle of the screen, all the components that aren't red, those are components that are going to be monitored by Citrix Director. And it does a good job of telling you effectively that the issue is not with Citrix. And we actually got this slide from Citrix website. So this is exactly from Citrix what Director is going to monitor. But as we all know, there are a lot of other components that impact the performance of your environment that Director is not going to monitor. And I think that's the major difference, because we are going to monitor everything that you see here on the screen, from availability at the particular locations to the hypervisor platforms, those back-end systems that integrate with the Citrix components, those end users, the network connectivity and their experience through the environment. So you can really get end-to-end visibility of the performance of that user and everything that goes into that performance. The other thing that I would like to point out, as well as being a major differentiating factor, is the historical data. So you can go back months or years, if you would like to see exactly how the environment has been changing, and understand your environment, so you can then put in place permanent fix actions, ultimately to get your to move your organization or your health system from being reactive to more of a sort of proactive state. Hopefully that answers that question.
Perfect, Yummy. So next one comes from Colleen. How are you pulling the data for troubleshooting? Do agents need installed on every machine?
That's a good question. Yeah, so we have a number of different ways that we collect information. The first of which is through agentless API integration. So we integrate with the major hypervisor platforms, as well as Citrix and VMware Horizon, through APIs. But we also have a lightweight intelligent agent that is deployed on the role servers. So that, in a Citrix environment, those would be the delivery controller, storefronts, licensing servers, things like that. And Horizon would be your connection servers and security servers, if you have those. And then we also deploy technology to the session hosts, so the VDAs or RDSH hosts or Windows 10 machines that are hosting sessions in your environment. No technology has to go on the endpoint machines to get any of the information that we presented in today's session. So there is a lightweight intelligent agent. It's about 1.5 meg in size, takes up about 0.1% of a CPU core, so very, very lightweight, but it really enables us to get those deep metrics and integrate with Citrix in order to get user experience information.
All right, Yummy. Next question comes from Ryan. Can you monitor the performance of the application itself?
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, we do have we do integrate with Epic. We have a technical partnership with Epic, and we actually can pull in Epic system pulse data into our technology. And we also have technology that can, it's similar to the application availability monitor, but it can actually preemptively log on and test specific workflows and the performance of an application, 24/7, giving you that additional insight into not only the delivery infrastructure or the delivery method of that application, but also the performance and the timings within those particular applications, so that you can track and trend those over time as well.
Ryan says thank you. Here's one that comes from Samantha. We use Cerner hosted and have VMware on premise. Does your tool work in that scenario?
Oh, absolutely. That's the classic double hop configuration, right? There's a on-premises VDI session, whether that's Citrix or VMware Horizon, like in Samantha's case. And then there's also a Citrix session from inside of that session up to Cerner RHO. because we're the only technology that can be deployed in Cerner's remote hosted facility, we get that visibility into the user experience for that session. And of course, we do have technology for VMware Horizon and Citrix on premises as well. So you'd be able to see both of those hops essentially and tell exactly where the slowness or issues are coming from for a particular user.
All right, Yemi, this is the last question unless someone submits another one, and this comes from Darren. We have 2 data centers. Will your reports combine from both sides, or will they be independent reports?
Because our technology is sort of innately multi-tenant, or it can support a multi-tenant sort of environment, that is something that you can pretty much decide. So whether you would like to see that from a overall sort of high level perspective, where you see all of those sessions and all of the information from both data centers, or if you would like to break that up, our technology has the ability to do that in its reporting as well. So pretty much up to you.
Well, thank you, Yemi. That was the last question. And thank you, all of us that joined us today. I will ask you, there'll be a short survey at the end. If you could take just 60 seconds and please respond based on your interest and your responses. We go ahead and modify the content we deliver in these webinars every week to make sure we're bringing the best information to all of you. Should any of you have additional questions, if you'd like to sign up for a free trial, if you'd like to see a custom demo, please email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com and we'll be more than happy to help you with whatever needs you may have. Again, I hope everyone has a great day and a great Labor Day weekend coming up. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.